the local point must be really taken into consideration. It's something we can confirm from the chamber side, that our German clients and partners, they stress that it's vital for them to have a German speaker, a German subsidiary. And I think that is really something we should be always aware when trying to enter the market. Now, we cannot have a theoretical discussion on all those topics without having a real German within the panel. And that's why we brought you, Markus. But now that I learned from Arona, I cannot call you Markus, I will call you Dr. Gick. And I will ask you kindly to say a little bit about your path, which is very interesting in Bertelsmann Stiftung, your current position, what is the NRWalley, NRWalley, I guess it's pronounced, and please also, if we already heard Giora speaking about the regional aspect, what would you recommend? What are the most important states Israelis should have in mind when going to Germany?
Thank you very much. Yes, as a sole German here on the panel, as you said, I'm probably pretty qualified to talk about the German view here. But let me maybe just tell you some words about myself. I've been some years to Israel, so I know the Israeli side pretty well. And yes, you were saying I have a doctor. You see here, I have even put my my shirt on. So that's pretty much like I'm a typical German in this respect, but I know the other side as well. From my background, I was working 4 years for the Bertelsmann Stiftung, Karen Bertelsmann, to support German-Israeli innovation on the one aspect and to foster German-Israeli relations. So I got very much into deep on both sides, and I built some innovation exchanges locally, as Giora was saying, which is very important in Shiri and Arona. We have to like start locally, and then that's pretty much a German way to do it. We built local German-Israeli innovation exchanges in these last 4 years. At the moment, I'm heading the organization NRWalley, which is a startup association, a regional startup association for the federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia. That's why NRW is an acronym for North Rhine-Westphalia. And just to give you some hints about this regional aspect and to dive a little more deeply into it. If you want to go to Germany, you first have to do a little research where actually which federal state is the state for you, because the states are so different also technology-wise, which companies are situated there. We have in Germany in general a big innovation gap at the moment. We have an innovation hunger in German companies. The so-called Mittelstand are like mid-sized German companies, hidden champions. They have actually at the moment lots of money to spend, and they want to digitalize, they want to find partners, they want to import innovation from abroad. And it's still lots of untapped potential, but you have to know to start where. And for example, for North Rhine-Westphalia, IoT is very strong there. So you have to do some research which area you want to go. For automotive, you can go to Bavaria or Baden-Württemberg, for example, or even now, you heard about Tesla, which will open the Europe plant in Brandenburg, Grünheide, maybe even to Brandenburg or Berlin. For e-commerce, you probably go to Berlin, and you don't go to some other countries, federal states. For insurance, you will go again to Munich or Bavaria or to North Rhine-Westphalia. So first, do your research. Second, you have to find a partner. And you have to find a partner, an Israeli partner who has boots on the ground, or a German partner directly. The Chamber of Commerce is a great partner. We as NRWalley for NRW and for North Rhine-Westphalia are a great partner. TrainingCQ Global is a great partner, but you have to look who has boots on the ground in the area you want to go in. And then third, go and explore, but look again, when you do, for example, a journey here to Germany, how is this journey structured? What are the people you're meeting? Do you meet some business development guy of a company? Then it's really mostly actually not worth your time. If you meet the CEOs, if you go to the factory floor, that is where you want to go, and that is actually where business is made, especially for these family-owned Mittelstand companies, which are so much untapped still, and they make the deal like immediately on the ground. And let me just tell you from my experience, I built in East Westphalia, which is part of North Rhine-Westphalia, an innovation exchange. And I brought 4 startups, 4 Israeli startups there. Probably you know some of them. 3D Signals, like everyone knows, Halo Digital, Robotai, and Wonderlogics. And we went to different Mittelstand companies like Grundlach Packaging Miele, probably you know, from the washing machines, and some others on the countryside. And we went to the factory floor. We went there, and there was one instance where Dr. Schubert of Grundlach Packaging, they are printing, for example, the tea bags, probably you know, and the Pringles, the chips, and they are printed by Grundlach Packaging. They are world market leader in their segment. And we went there on the factory floor, and actually Uri from Robotai, we saw there our robot not working properly, and people had to sort out later the different stacks, how it was put together. And you know, Uri was seeing this because we went together with the CEO of Grundlach Packaging there, and the CEO said, "Okay, you see this, and you have the right company for this. If you have a solution, you have 3 months, figure it out, and then you have like a project here to do." And that's how you want to go there. You want to meet the right people on the right level, and then you can do business in the right location.
Lovely, Markus. I go back to Markus. Thank you very, very much for that. And we go back to you, Arona. And what I think would be interesting, give us homework before we go to the German market, before we open the subsidiary. What are the musts that you say are, or the V's we have to make as an Israeli startup? And unmute yourself.
Okay, so you will make a good impression by coming across as an expert in your subject, someone who has thoroughly researched the German market and can also answer technical questions. Make sure that your proposal is fact-based, detailed, logical, and realistic. Alongside sharing the technical aspects of your startup, you need to be able to also discuss the financial aspects. Also, it's very important as an Israeli startup to understand that the Germans are much less risk comfortable than Israelis. They don't like to take unquantifiable. Human culture, the words, "it will work out," or as we say in Hebrew, "yeh beseder," don't exist. So you need to also think long-term. This exit mentality that is very much present in Israel is less common in Germany. Their focus is more on long-term and on achieving stability, and they are willing to wait for results if a project is sound enough.
Thank you very much for that. Shiri, to you and from you, I would really like to know how, from your experience, what do you think we have to do and how to look for potential candidates?
Yes, so this was a very interesting challenge when we started there because, of course, I mean, you can always use usual channels such as you know, the networking like LinkedIn and Facebook and post the job on your website. But I think what really makes a difference, especially when you need to start somewhere, is that you really have a partner who already knows the area well and knows how to target the relevant people for you and who really understands who you are, what's your company's DNA and what you're looking for. So we started with CQ Global Assistance. Back then they were still called Nisha Global, and it was really great because not only did they get a good sense of who we are and what's important for us and how are we actually working in our day-to-day, they also managed to really search our industry, search for candidates who come with the right background. They managed to do a first dig that was very important for us because we got only candidates who already met all the requirements, and they were also really prepared to talk to us. I mean, they already heard about Israel and the Israeli startups and about Innoviz. And when we spoke to them, we felt it was really easy compared to talking to any other candidate. For example, if I compare it with hiring in Israel, that people sometimes they know more, sometimes they know less. But the candidates we met in Germany through the assistance of CQ Global, it was so easy to talk to them, and they were really into it. So it gave us a very good start, and we managed to hire our first man on the ground in Germany. Back then, we were looking for a country manager who was mostly focused on business development, but he had to come from our industry and to know how things work and to have a very strong technical background, which is something which is a must with a product like ours. And this was a very, very good start for us. So yeah, so I would recommend to start with a good partner to look for candidates. Later on, and especially after you get your feet on the ground, then you can also use additional channels if you feel they are effective for you.
Markus, to you, I would ask, either you have something to add to what Shiri said. Maybe you have a German perspective on tips on how to find the right employee. But I also want to draw your attention to one of the questions from the chat, which is, what is the right approach in... Can you all mute yourself? Shiri, maybe you? The right question, the question from the audience, from asked by Sagi, what's the right approach in finding new partners, distributors, or system integrators when speaking about the initial few sales? I mean, prior to setting up a subsidiary. Before I pass over the question to you, from the Chamber's view, we believe that Markus already said it. Go ask, get your advice, get it in our chamber, get it from other partners you believe in who have the double view. And first of all, let them advise you for your individual company, whether it makes sense for you to go local with the salespersons, we can help find distributors and so on. Markus, not one, unmute yourself, yeah.
Perfect, thank you very much, Toda Rabba. So let me just add to Shiri's just a short explanation or a short adding to it. What I find really useful, where I was invited on, actually is an Israeli group. It's called Israeli German TechNet, and they invite, it's a Facebook group, you cannot find it, it's by invitation only, and they are like really big, and they are always in Berlin and actually in Germany itself, and there is a job offerings of Israeli startups, and there you have people who are like on both sides already, and know the Israeli, some of the Israeli startups and some of the startup world in Germany, and they know Germany as well. So it's a kind of a mixture there between German, English, and Hebrew, and that's probably another venue. So I don't want to put, as she also said, the LinkedIn and the regular approaches too much into focus. That you can also use, but I would use, of course, like the hot intros you can get via also Israeli startups on the ground. Shiri is an amazing opportunity, but others are as well. You can look at OrCamp, for example, here in Cologne. So we have Israeli startups here in Germany, very successful Israeli startups, and they are ready to help, right? So you can like have them as an anchor point as well. And of course, you can use social media, where are some dedicated groups established by entrepreneurs Israeli entrepreneurs in Germany, which also can be of help. Okay, and the second question about the right approach, I can just reiterate and also just strengthen the point Charme made. I would find, if you don't want to go local first with your own boots on the ground, try to find a German partner here, or find an Israeli partner with a German partner on the ground. And you can use different fairs, for example, or different organizations. One which comes to mind, because I was 4 years in East Westphalia doing this, the Founders Foundation, they have Startup Nation Central as for the Hinterland Conference, which is the biggest B2B conference in Germany nowadays. It started 3 years ago, and it's now one of the biggest. And they have Israel as their partner country. So if you're into B2B, if you are an IoT company, that's the place to be. And that's actually a place you don't have to have boots on the ground. You go there, you will make connections, and then after that, you decide if it's worth your while, if you can establish, boots on the ground or a company there.
Thank you so much, Markus. Let's go back to the real professional among us, the Giora. What can you add? What are the things that we must take into account? Practical tips, maybe.
So thank you, Charme. I'd really like to share some practical tips that that can help the people on this call today not make mistakes that others have made in the past. I think that's the best learning that we can have. One of the things that we see in our many interactions with German candidates and German and Israeli companies working in is the initial engagement. The initial engagement with potential candidates all over the world and even in Israel needs to be done in a proper manner. In Germany, the initial engagement needs to be even more so. It needs to immediately send the right messages. Otherwise, the candidates, the talents that are not looking to make a move, those that you want to target, they won't be interested in continuing the discussion if the initial engagement isn't in their best interests. And this means that in the initial engagement, you need to sell the opportunity. Some of our customers in the beginning, when they landed in Germany, they would ask a candidate the cosmic question: why do you want to join my company? And the German candidate would lean back and say, I didn't say I want to join your company. You asked me to listen to you and see what you're pitching. Now, again, this may be agnostic or not agnostic. This may be the same in many countries, but in Germany, I think the initial engagement has a huge importance. We can see that pre-COVID, okay, with COVID, you have to take these numbers a bit less. Pre-COVID, we had a 75% response rate to our initial interaction as CQ Global with potential candidates who are not looking for a job. In Germany, this was somewhere around 40-45%, meaning that the Germans, even in the initial phase, they give a lot of thought, do they want to interact? And I think this is a great opportunity for Israeli companies to sell themselves in a manner which will bring the value that they want. That's one thing that I think everybody needs to remember. The other thing is you need to understand the social benefits and legalities of Germany. They're specific like every country, but again, if you understand them and if you know how to talk the talk, then the German sitting across from you on the video will gain respect. But if you tell him, and again, I'm talking about mistakes that we've seen, if you tell him that in your company, you don't like to give car allowance to somebody who's been getting car allowance in Germany for 20 years, they don't understand that. They don't accept that because, as we all know, the local benchmark is local, meaning you have to understand what is given locally and respect that. So if you don't want to give a car allowance to somebody, you can't say, in my company, we don't give car allowances. You can say, you should say, well, maybe car allowance isn't what we give, but we will give something else instead. I've seen people in Germany come back to us and say, listen, these people, they don't understand how to work in Germany because they're saying things that are not logical. And the other thing on that note is really the third-party payroll provider. If you don't have an entity, if you have an entity in Germany, by the way, and it's not complicated to open an entity in Germany, I know that it's the nightmare of every CFO. They don't like opening entities anywhere. But in Germany, it's not complicated, and Charme knows this probably best of all of us, maybe Dr. Markus, but it's not complicated to open an entity. And my suggestion is always visit the opportunity to open an entity if you can. But if you don't open an entity, then find a good third-party payroll provider, and we usually do that for our customers in order to help them, but somebody that is on the ground and that can, from the ground, build you a contract and give you the legal and financial support that you need in employee relationships. This is critical because this will give the potential candidates that you're hiring confidence in what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much. Before I pass the word on to Shiri, I also want to thank all our lovely audience for a very, very active chat, which I'm following in parallel. And I think Alex, for example, who's asking for help to open a headquarter. Alex, I think you got at the right place with the right people, so you're free to reach out afterwards to all of us. But there's also the question regarding the language. So whether English is a problem. So Shiri, when you tell us now from your experiences what you learned about the recruitment story, maybe you can also take it to account and answer that if you had any troubles in the beginning with language barriers, but also did you face any other surprises when you opened your entity?
Yeah, well, regarding language barriers, no, I did not feel any issue because everybody speaks English to a level that we can communicate perfectly well. I think the most surprises I had were in terms of legal aspects that I was not familiar with prior to beginning in Germany. And there's a bunch of those. I mean, there's one aspect that Giora mentioned earlier. The notice time period is so much longer than what we're used to in Israel. Because in Israel, you know, it's usually 30 days, in some cases 60 days, which is a lot. But in Germany, it's usually 3 months from the end of the quarter. So sometimes you need to wait for the person you want to start for almost half a year, which is unheard of here. So it meant a lot and it affected the way we plan in Germany. We realized that we need to think way ahead of time, think forward, fast forward, and think what we're going to need in a few months and prepare and take into account that it may be a very long process. In addition to that, when we had our first agreement signed with a local employee, we realized that there's a section that is very common in Israeli work agreements referring to the non-competition. We usually expect employees who leave us not to go to work for other companies who compete with us for at least 1 year. But in Germany, we realize it's totally different. If we want to prevent an ex-employee to go and work for a competitor, we need to keep paying them for as long as we want them to be committed to us. So this was another big surprise that we needed to think about and deal with. There's no choice. We just had to. And one more point that people need to take into account is relating to the labor laws of companies depending on their size. In Germany, as long as the company is small and with less than 10 employees, the set of labor rules is actually similar to those we know of in Israel in many aspects. But after you have more than 10 employees, then it's a different story. There are different labor laws, and you need to be aware of those and prepare well in advance. So when you start growing, you need to take it into account and decide when is the right point to become bigger than 10. So that's it.
Really, thank you so much. And I think we want to now really go in, as we're in the last round, we want to now really hear what we should definitely not do. And Arona, you're the expert on that. What is a big no-no?
So one of the first big no-nos is do not arrive unprepared for a meeting. Don't what we call wing it. Germans will arrive very well prepared for meetings with all the facts and figures at their disposal. Do the same. The idea of attending a meeting or a negotiation process without having all the details or without having a firm opinion is considered quite unusual for Germans. If your negotiations are conducted over several days, make sure that you write up careful notes and come back prepared the next day, because they will. And be prepared to go over details time and time again, because they want to be sure before reaching decisions. So this might be very tedious, thinking out of an Israeli mindset, but again, remember my first tip of the day, patience. So patience, to respect the process. Thoroughness outweighs speed. And thus decision-making takes longer than you are used to when maybe doing business in Israel. Often outside experts will be consulted, which again might delay the decision-making process. The last point is that in Israel, we don't have a good work-life balance, okay? We're constantly connected, whether it's evening, whether it's on the weekends, and it's fine, it works in our culture. But in Germany, there is a clear division between work and life. So don't call or expect your German colleague to work after hours or on the weekends or during vacations, unless he or she specifically tells you that he will. And last tips to remember, hard work and efficiency is valued. So Germans are very task-oriented. They appreciate loyalty, honesty. Say what you will do what you say, and this is a sure formula for successful collaboration.
Wow, this would be a lovely ending, but we are not ending now. In the meanwhile, Sharon was so kind to also upload all the requested contact details of the panelists. We are really looking forward to hear from you right afterwards, and we'll answer your questions regarding freelancing, regarding legal issues, anything we might help with. But till then, Giora, first of all, anything you want to add to what Arona says? Do you have any big no-no you want to share? And is there maybe some concrete event that you remember that characterizing doing business in Germany?
So I think to piggyback on what Arona just mentioned, I think that the engagement and the interaction and the negotiations with a German candidate needs to be done in the spirit of the German culture. This is something that is correct for every different culture you work in. We work in, I think, over 30 cultures in the world. So we wake up every morning and ask ourselves where we are. But Germany, because we're talking about Germany, I think the spirit needs to be German. If I remember correctly, I think Germany is one of the only countries in the world where the contract is written both in English and in German. Because legally it needs to be done this way. I think that in all of the other countries that we work in, and I'm looking now at over 30 countries, so if I might be mistaken by one, but I think that none of the other countries, the employee contract is done in English, so just in English. So that's I think the spirit needs to be really important here. The other thing is the onboarding. I think one of the main success factors of hiring the right people in Germany is how you onboard them, how you support them in the beginning. Usually if it's one person, he's alone, he or she, they're alone. They don't need just a standard support. They need to be sort of engrossed or enveloped in a 360 degrees, 100% type of support that you need to put together as a company. And I think this is really important. And the last thing about on that aspect is something that kind of always reminds me of the difference between Germany and other places. We were looking for a head of EMEA, and the customer wanted the head of EMEA, president of EMEA, to be in Germany, which is logical. That 60% of their business was in the DACH area. So we did a process, and we got to the finalist, and everybody was quite happy. A few months went by, and only then did this candidate realize that they haven't opened an entity yet. Although it was mentioned, it wasn't realized. And the candidate, a president, a senior executive, decided not to join them because they said to him that they've decided not to open the entity for the next 6 or 12 months. And he said, well, I'm going to leave you. And this was a big impact on their business and a setback for them. And the reason I remember that is because it could have really ended differently. So remember those things that are important to the Germans, and deal with them in a way that will give them the feeling that the spirit is there. Don't try to make them Israeli. Try to understand their needs as Germans and their culture. And I think with that in mind, lots of success can happen.
Giora, amazing. And Arona also added something to what was said by you in our chat. And in the meanwhile, also Lilit asked something, which I also think picks up on what you said. Lilit wants to know if there are any changes in the German workplace due to Corona. And I do think that picks up.
I'll just mention one thing before our dear doctor on the ground in Germany says. One thing is that the Germans are less inclined to move. This is in many places in the world. We see people that are less inclined to leave their comfort zone. In Germany, even more so. And the other aspect is that because of the way the Germans are dealing with COVID on the day-to-day basis, some companies are freezing their German business and trying to see how they're dealing with the COVID before they unfreeze them. So those are two aspects that we see.
Yes, and of course, COVID is also on that respect maybe helpful for us Israelis because Germans have now been forced to get used to work remotely. Of course, in Germany, home office was suddenly a necessity. So I think it might be even easier now when recruiting that people get used already to this remote working together. And of course, and Arona has backed up you here, the onboarding process is probably vital to how the process afterwards looks. Markus, we're getting to our very last question, and that's you gonna be. And we want to hear from you, our native. Your tips, your lessons that you learned. You mentioned it in the beginning, 3D signals and some others. Tell us all those kinky details, the dirty details that you learned when bringing together Mittelstand and medium-sized German companies with Israeli startups.
Okay, yeah, that's actually, as I said, there are probably many kinky details, but I will just dive into some small of them, some small details, and the rest you can also ask us, all of us, or ask me separately by email, because I see our time is already running short a little. But what I want to tell you, first maybe for Corona, because let me just add you from the ground how it's at the moment. Corona is, we have rising numbers in Germany, and it's a complete different world nowadays as it was before Corona. Before Corona, you had to fight to do home office. So people, when I remember in the Bertelsmann Stiftung, I had to fight that I had 1 day home office during the week. And there was a big hassle because regularly people don't do home office. They are all in Gütersloh, which is not the center of the world, and they have to like stay there the week. So that was actually a pretty big thing. Nowadays, everyone does home office, so it's easier, the onboarding, the recruiting, but it's also for many Germans, it's new, right? So they learned in the last half a year, but it's still a process. Second, you were mentioning how does this interaction happen and what are maybe some pitfalls? And what I want to tell you, what I told my startups when we did this journey to East Westphalia into the unknown, deep into like a regional German hub, what should they do and what should they not? They should not over-promise and under-deliver. Like if you have great slides and you promise the world, they will not take you seriously. So we heard it from Arona, from Shiri, and from Giora, and from Charme, and I think this is a lot of value in this. Be honest, be truthful, and be reliable. Don't promise too much. Do it differently, right? Under promise and over deliver. If the project is for 3 months, and you deliver it some days earlier, that is great. Not 2 weeks earlier, that's also not trustworthy, but do it a little earlier and show that you value the time, value the patience, and that you are a reliable partner. And second thing, when you go to Germany, go with the right people. So and it was also said, go with the people who know technology, who go with the founder and the CEO. If you meet on a CEO level, and that's again about status, don't bring your business development guy along. The CEO will not take him seriously, him or her. Do it differently. Bring the right level with you and the people who know your product, who are deeply embedded into the product, who can feel the product, and then you have a great start working with German companies.
Oh, Markus, you're so right. I must stress that better to under exaggerate. Promise Germans always small margins. They don't want to hear big wins. That's only scaring them off. Even if you really believe that you can make a 20% deal on that, make it a little bit less, and then you will have them listening to your proposal. I must thank all of you for being flexible, for being remote panelists. It's not easy, for shutting off your kids and dogs while we're here. And I really once more want to thank our audience. And I see that we have really detailed questions. People obviously a little bit before entering the German market, when there are issues coming up of health insurance for new employees, then again, I must say those are questions we can only answer case by case and not here is as a overall. So please reach out to us. You have all our details. You can reach out to all of us together or individually as you prefer. And also Arona, I see, is with you, Markus, here on your under delivery. So we all agree on that. But we don't want to under deliver. We want to always give the best we Israeli startups. And I'm happy that you found interest in our panel today. Thank you once more to Yotam for putting this together, and for Sharon and Liron, who did it from the background. And I'm wishing all of you an amazing COVID-free day. And I hope that we will have a lot of follow-on discussions. And saying bye for now. Have a good day. Einen wunderschönen Tag an alle. Und passt auf euch auf.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.